Hey folks, welcome to this look at Worldographer 2025. I'm Joe Wetzel, the creator of the program, and what you see in front of you is just a sample map, kind of auto-generated by Worldographer that I like to have as the backdrop for the opening of videos. So this is a video that's going to do a quick overview of the major and some of the minor changes in Worldographer 2025 as opposed to regular Worldographer. Um, so we've got a crowdfunding going on for just a couple of more days as I'm recording this, which is on Saturday, October 5th. It ends on Tuesday, October 8th at about 11 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. So time's ticking. If you want to check out the tool, there's a demo on the page, on the crowdfunding page. So we'll link to the crowdfunding page, and then on that crowdfunding page will be a link to a demo of Worldographer that has all of the features, usable. Nothing's held back with the license code for the next couple of weeks. So you'll be able to give it a good try and see if it's a good fit for the way that you like to make maps. And if it is, then we hope that you'll back it. But again, you've only got a couple of days to do so, depending on when you see this exactly. So with that out of the way, let's go into some of those details. Again, this is going to be an overview of these changes. If you want the more detailed view of things, then go ahead and look for the additional videos that we'll have linked as well. So I just went to File and say New World Kingdom Map, and that brings up this screen, which if you're familiar with Worldographer, you've probably recognized most of it. If you are not, then I invite you to check out like our Worldographer 101 video. There's also, probably there's some videos on setting up an initial World Kingdom map in Worldographer, as well as our online instructions on our website. We've got some web pages that go over all the details of Worldographer. And although Worldographer 2025 is a big major rewrite where we're changing, adding a bunch of additional features, as well as making changes to the back end to allow for those other changes, and giving it a little bit of a UI facelift as well. So that's what we're doing for the crowdfunding, and asking you to support that if you find the tool worthwhile. But currently there is Worldographer pre-2025 available as well, that many folks have been using for quite a while. So again, this section here, the generate checkboxes here, are new. I personally prefer to generate things as I go with the generate menu. Once you've got a map open, you'll have this generate menu, and you'd be able to generate coasts, generate rivers, generate empires, generate a hex crawl, and generate roads as well. Most of those things are already in Worldographer, but only through the generate menu. However, one is new, which is the generate roads section, which we'll get to in a minute, and the various other generate options have improvements of various types, like generate rivers. It gives you a prettier tapered river if you're using the shapes approach, for example, which you can do a classic shapes, which are going to be kind of your flat colors, which match the map style that you see there. And then there's also a textured version, which is our matches better with our isometric icons that are kind of reminiscent of the computer game Civilization, maybe 2, 3, 4, that era of it. So let's check a bunch of these things on, just to show what it's like when it does all that work. Now I do want to just dial this back a little bit, because I find that to be useful to do that. I'm going to leave off generating roads for the villages and forts and the ruins, just because that actually can add an extra 10 or 20% of time to the generation of your world. But it is kind of cool to see it all happen at once, which is what you'll see here. But like I said, I like to use that generate menu. So everything else on here is stuff that's already in Worldographer. We've got all these settings for how much land do you want, and how mountainous and vegetation and so forth. One other new thing, though, is over here, our configure terrain used. And this is useful that if you want to swap out all the terrain, you can, for example, we've got a ring lord icon set that's kind of like a black and whitish or washed out sepia style icons that match up with what the Lord of the Rings early published books used for a map style. And so if you wanted to do that, you can change, you can install those icons and then pick those from these drop downs. You also can go to load settings, though. We've got, in that particular case, we've created a settings file as well. Or if you have some alien world, for example, that you want to just completely change up the terrain to something, a version of hell or an alien world with strange vegetation and so forth, you can do that through this dialog. So it's kind of cool. So that's all new in Worldographer 2025. And then over here, just to I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but this is just setting up the size of your map. How many hexes do you want it to be? And what's the initial size of the hexes, although you can always zoom in and zoom out. So let's hit Generate Map, and you can see that it's already created in the landform, and it's going through and creating coasts and rivers and so forth. I should point out that the algorithm itself got a lot faster to generate a world. There's some extraneous stuff that we didn't need, and so it actually cut back the time significantly to the point where it used to be that we would only auto-generate the world maybe once every, or if the number of hexes wide and high was 200 at most, whereas now we're doing it where it's up to 1,000. So you can see that we're saying it's 5 times or more faster. In addition to that, we'll take a quick look at this, but in addition to that, we did make a change to the world generation, the terrain generation itself. For example, we used to have these clusters of mountains that we would, we still do try to extend them down. So you can see several in a row like that. You can see a bigger mountain chain here, and one cutting across over there as well. So we were trying to do that before, but due to simply a bug, it was actually stopping after just a couple of clusters instead of making a line of, potentially, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 clusters in a row to give you a mountain chain. So that change was made to get a more accurate world. In addition to that, we put our the deserts that get created, auto-generated, are more at the 30-degree parallels, or 30-degree latitudes, I should say. And vegetation, we also take into account the latitude for the vegetation and wind patterns at that latitude, and try not to have vegetation downwind of your mountains, depending on the latitudes. Now, that's not a perfect thing. It does, you've got a lot of wind patterns that are going at angles and stuff like that. So, but there's it gets you closer to what you want, and then it's all fully editable from there. So with that out of the way, let's see. So this is the map that's been generated, and it's got all of these roads added in, and it's got a number of rivers. Like I said, our rivers are now kind of, in my opinion, they're prettier. They do give you more of a tapering, and they're longer. It's not going to be perfect. For example, I can see down here, because this coast was added in there, it doesn't quite reach to there. So those are just shapes. Because we generated them as shapes. There's also a feature option where you can create them as features. And again, we've got more detailed videos on all this kind of stuff, but I can just select this particular shape. Oh, actually, our rivers, to get the taper effect, are actually several lines put together. So we're going to select down closer to where it ends. And then I can just take that last point and drag it into the actual water area to pull that off. So that's so that's your world generation in a nutshell. Everything is all fully editable. You just saw me change one of the rivers. Of course, you can change up the terrain and add in something else. Like if you wanted to have some light forest here instead of heavy forest, you can do that. Another big change to Worldographer has been the UI kind of facelift, if you will. We've got some better looking icons, I think, as well as some better layout of the different drawers. Actually, we're switching away from having drawers on the side here to having these tabs. And these tabs let us have internal scroll bars, so like a scroll bar that's only a section of that overall tab. So you can keep these controls here up on the top and these controls here on the bottom as you're scrolling through all this stuff, instead of kind of having to scroll through, pick one, and then check a box or something, especially on the features drawer here, for example. So same sort of thing, but here it's kind of split half and half, side by side, as well as a few controls on the top. And you can just scroll through all these, but you still have access to this other stuff on the side. And another cool little enhancement is sometimes, particularly for like buildings, if you're doing a town or a village or sort of thing, they can look kind of similar, especially zoomed way out. So if you want to make them all bigger, you can change it to whatever value you'd like, and the buttons all get larger, so you can see a little bit better what each one is. Looking at the next thing here, we've also got a big improvement to map levels. If you're familiar with Worldographer, we've got this concept where you can have world, continent, kingdom, and province levels. So you can kind of drill down and you can create a map based on the parent map level, and you can say that it's 6 hexes across per hex in the parent, or 5, or whatever. I'll keep the 6 here. I don't think it'll take too long to generate that next level. So there it goes. It's done. And the big improvement here is that if you were to look at Worldographer's result, you would be able to tell, like, this hex here of tropical forest would be very uniformly tropical forest all the way, the edges and everything, to each edge. Like, there'd be very little encroachment of adjacent terrain into this one. And so you could kind of see the exact hexes and the exact shape of the hexes. Whereas here, because it is a little bit more spread out and allows the adjacent terrain to kind of seep in a little bit more, it's a lot harder to tell, especially if I do turn off the grid. You're not going to see it nearly as much. And actually, I can, let me go back. Another change was we improved the options. There's an option for randomly used related terrain for fills and children. So now I can go and I can regenerate that level. I can go to, I can go to regenerate map level, and I can say, create it based on the world level, and create a new continent level, and do 6 to 1 again, and boom, it'll do this. And now what that did was it added some other related terrain to the hexes. So you've got a little bit of grassland here and there, even though there was no grassland around. You've got a cultivated farmland hex, even though that wasn't around there. Okay, so there's also improvements about importing graphics. So if I go, I'm just going to bounce back up to the world level, but we can import icons and terrain features, textures, in a couple of different ways. One is to have pre-set up configuration folders, and that's just a matter of having a known folder on your computer and then putting the icon files in there, and then you can check boxes to add each of those subfolders that you want to use. We've also got, you can also just use a file chooser and pick them using a file chooser, and that's what these will do. And then configuring allows you to configure them after the fact. But I'll go ahead and add custom terrain, and here I've got my various Patreon icons that we've been doing recently, and I can go into, for example, let's take a look at Retro Wasteland here, and classics there, and here we've got a few terrain icons for some specific unusual icon type or terrain types that would be for a Retro Wasteland. And I can say okay, and what it's doing there is it's actually taking, it used to be that we would have these codes that got kind of complicated to try to preset a background color and preset the elevation and so forth of these different things. But now we've got it all here. We do need to tweak this a little bit as we continue refining the software before the final release, where these should not be cut off. It should give you the full word background there, for example. But what it's doing is it's sampling a couple of spots on that tile, on that image, and coming up with an appropriate background color for it, as well as these other values for offset. Doesn't matter much. Again, that gets into the details, and I'm trying to keep this high level, but also elevation is another thing that you can set, and you can give it a category. So we can say that we want these all to be retro wasteland as the category. And that's another improvement in Worldographer 2025. Moving on to a different map style. So in Worldographer, we can do a couple of different map styles, but the city, town, village map generation got a few important changes as well. For example, we've got a few new street layout options. So we've got like this octagonal street layout option here. So we can hit generate map there, and it's creating a map, and I can zoom around here till this refreshes, and you can see the octagon shape of the street network, and it's placing all of those buildings on there. Even better, though, is in Worldographer now we're giving you probably 3 times as many of the non-medieval icons for a city map, city village type map. So we've got, for our clean futuristic style here, we're giving you 25 or so, whereas before we were only giving you about 8 icons. And same thing there's also a gritty future, there's a retro future here, then we are scrolling through all the medieval stuff there, and then we get into some modern, and then there's some Western stuff as well. And we're also putting into the tool, so that's enough to give you a basic town or basic village. We're also putting into the tool the settlement data, and you can easily select the settlement data for that. For example, we can hit clear prior data. I like to do that just so that you don't mix up your medieval and modern or whatever other setting you might be doing. Now, sometimes you might want to not clear the prior data. That's why it's not a default option. But say you're adding in some elven buildings or something, and you want to have a town that's got all different styles, you can do that. But built into the tool, we can say we want to make a Western town. You can also make up your own files with whatever icons and styles and settings you want. I'm going to go back to that configure settlement data stuff, and now we can see that we've got all the Western stuff, and then we've got building details here. So for many of the more important buildings, you can pull up and you can see what does the cafe, like who's working there, what do they have for sale, and that sort of stuff. But you can tweak all of these and save that configuration so you can then load it later. But here we're not making any changes yet, so we'll just close it, and we will go to generate a new one. Now that we've got the Western set up, we can go to new city, town, village map, and we're just going to make this just a branching kind of street network. It's not planned out, of course. And we're going to change the texture so that we've got something more like a desert floor type thing. Our road can be, instead of that, we can do like a mountain floor, I think. Excuse me. If I pick mountain floor here, that's just going to give us kind of a darker roads, if you will. And so it's going through and doing its work, and you can see it's placing these around. Let's see if we can find the city center. No. Is it down here further? Okay, there's our city center, is where these 2 slightly wider roads meet. So it's creating all that for us and filling in, enough for 5,000 people. Moving right along, we've also got some special lines built into the tool. For that, I'm going to bounce back to one of our other maps here. Use this map here. And for example, if you want to have show that there's a plateau, for example. Let's find a good spot for a plateau. Let's say that we've got a plateau in this area over here. We can go to shapes, and we can go to a line. Actually, let me do a select. Just a pro tip: if you want a line that's similar to another line, you can just select the prior line then it loads in all of those settings. And then I'm going to create my new line. And here I can say that, you know, these hills end in a line here, which doesn't match perfectly with the hexes, but it's pretty close. It's not a road, so I'm just going to delete this one particular tag here. It can go on the roads layer, but we'll just put it on the above terrain layer there. And then the new thing, though, is that you can, well, you can change the pattern so that it's an elevation line and it's sticking out. But that elevation line doesn't look very good. You know, those things are too thick. Yeah, so we've got customization for that now. So we can say that we want these lines to match. You know, they also want to be 5% of a hex wide. And then the distance, yeah, they don't need to be that far apart. You know, they can be, you know, maybe 20 apart or something like that. And then we want them to definitely not be that long, so we can, you know, bring them back to whatever values we think makes the most sense. And then the separation would only be for a railroad line, where you want the two different lines that make up the railroad line. You can separate how far apart they are. All of these are percentages of hexes. So that's another new thing in Worldographer, is to give you control over that functionality. All right, next up we're going to talk about Battlemat Rooms. This is all new functionality in Worldographer 2025. We're going to start with a blank map. All this stuff is in there. They've got some improvements, like we're using my preferred window style now, and doors and so forth. But we're going to do a blank map to show off the new functionality, and we don't need anything too big, but we'll go to 20 by 20. Hit generate map, and we've got a blank map. Now, to show where our grid is, since we've got kind of a blank we can either change the color of the grid by going here. Since we've got the square grid, we'd want to change it here. So we can change our color of our grid slightly so you can see it. So you can see that there. You could also go into terrain and drop in some terrain if you wanted to. But what we're going to show off here is the room functionality, which is pretty cool. So I can say I want a new room, and I can pick what type I want. And right now we just have a few, but we'll be adding a few more before the release. And I expect this is something where maybe every release will put out another new room type or something like that. So I can go to empty hall, and I can say that I want it to be, you know, what the floor and walls should be like. How big do I want it to be? Now I want it to be a narrow hall. You know, I do want it to be a little, you know, run some length, but I don't want it to be too wide. So this will be, you know, 2 tiles wide, or maybe 10 feet. And then how many doors and windows do you want? Let's say that we're doing a dungeon, so we don't want any windows at all. But we've got our doors. And then I can just hover over, and I can place it. You know, I can see where to place it. I can line it up with the grid. I can drop that there, and it instantly adds that. Okay, that's kind of cool. But then even better is, oh, I want to make the library now. You know, so I have no windows or anything. Do I want to have, you know, bookcases along the walls? How many chairs and sofas do I want? Well, let's say that I want to have 4 chairs but no sofas. Now, I suspect that this is going to just be a best guess at placing them. It might not place them all, but we'll see. And let's say that I want my library to go back to that 5 by 5. And I don't need any doors in it, because we'll say that we're already using the door coming off of the hallway to make it. And so I can go ahead and make that there. And so it comes close. We've got a couple of things overlapping. But again, since Worldographer is all fully editable and everything, we can figure this out and select this here, select that there, delete that. Maybe we want to keep that other door that's up there still, so I'm just going to drag these guys down. You know, drag these all down, and then drag this door up. And there you go. That's our library. And the same sort of thing exists for, go back to the rooms. You know, so we've got a couple of other room types built in, a bedroom, a dining room, and a kitchen right now. And we'll be adding a couple more before the actual release of Worldographer 2025. Let's see. Talking one more thing that I want to get out is throughout the campaign for the crowdfunding, we've had a few polls asking folks for what additional features they'd like to see added to Worldographer, and that's been a lot of fun to do. We've got a couple more that we're going to be doing in the coming weeks, but one of them that we got in really quickly was this notion of having this color selector, so that I can select the color. And I think it's most useful for shapes, for example. So if I go back to our world map here, let's say that I want to make a new shape, and I'm not sure exactly what color some of these things are. Let's say I'm making my new shape, and I go polygon, and I want to build an island over here, and it's a very small island. There's not much to it. I don't want any border. I'm gonna pick a color, but I don't want any border to it, so I drop that. And it's like, well, what color is this? Now, in our color picker currently, we've got, if I pull this up, I've got these different swatches here, as well as these swatches here. Now, these are designed to be the default terrain, but not all the default terrain. So if you're using something that's not typically used on a map, or it's not one of the most common 12 icons, then you'd have to go, you'd have to pick whichever one of these is closest, or just off your screen, the recording area, there is a custom color button just below the custom color text. There's these swatches, and then there's a custom color link just below that, and I can click that and bring this up, and I can use these various color controls to get any color that I might want. But what if you just want to match it to something else that's there? You can just hit this color selector here, this medicine dropper button here, click on the map where you want it, and it'll match that. It'll match this, and since we have a shape selected already, then it's also going to recolor that for us as well. That is also available on our configure menus. If I go to configure terrain here and pick the classic or whichever one I want it to be editing, I can use these color selectors. For example, if I wanted to use this one here, and then say that I want my deserts to have this at background instead of the default one, so I can pick that there. I can do the same thing for this one. Oop. That must have, let's clear that one out. Close, shift, clear that button out. Sorry about that. Little bug to get through. Like I said, this was just added in the past 3 or 4 days, so we got a little bit more testing to do with that. But point is that you can use those buttons. Let's go through that again. Let's configure terrain, classic. Scroll down here. So since we didn't save, that setting was not saved, but we'll just pick one of these this time around. Do that. Updated it. Hit apply, hit close, and now we can go ahead and go to terrain, pick this terrain, and drop it there, and you can see, well, let's pick a different spot. There we go. So that's the last thing that I wanted to talk about in this video. I hope that that's all been very useful to you, and hopefully you can see where the tool's going and see if it's a good fit for you. We do update the software regularly, at least every quarter, oftentimes every month, with additional features and fixes and such. So we'd love to get your support for that going forward. Again, we'll have the link down below there. This is your last chance to get in on the crowdfunding. We've got one more poll for new features as well up there that will run through the end of the campaign to give folks that are coming late one more chance to vote. So we'd love to get your support on it. Thanks a bunch.